Hey everybody, my name is Brandon from thestocksnews.com, and today I'm going to talk about Zoom stock, ticker symbol ZM. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go into Google and talk about the macro picture of what's going on in the stock market and how that's affecting Zoom stock. And then I'm going to go into the earnings report to talk about how Zoom stock is doing as a business, and then I'm going to go into the trading charts to see if there's a level or two to buy Zoom if we want to buy Zoom. So now let's get started. So here we are in Google, and as you can see, even though Zoom had a really nice day today, up about 10% in the regular session, if we look at the 1 month view, we see that Zoom is still down over 20%. Of course, the main thing that was causing fear on Wall Street at this point in time was interest rates rising. And I've said this before, that means that money that the companies are using to grow is becoming more expensive. As the theory goes, because of this, valuation multiples of a company should contract, and that impacts high valuation, high multiple names like Zoom. But again, big picture here, we're only around a 1.6% interest rate on the 10-year bonds, when we're normally around the 2% mark if we're lucky. Also, interest rates are actually up today. So if the thesis is that interest rates rising can cause stocks like Zoom to go down, then why didn't Zoom fall today when interest rates rose? This is one of the reasons why I did not think and do not think that interest rates are the only reason why Zoom has been falling the past week. The next macro point I want to talk about here in Google is about the stay-at-home trend. Right now, the medicine that we need to get over this health crisis has been making its way to protect our population. And from a humanities point of view, that is definitely a good thing. We do not want to be confined in our houses. We want to go out and travel and go on vacations. But the Zoom business model, at least right now, is the opposite of that. It feeds on people staying at home and video calling their coworkers who have like 5 kids and a dog, and somehow all of those kids are crying at the same time during our meeting. There are good arguments that can be made on whether the stay-at-home trend or work from home trend will continue in the future, but this is just something you have to think a lot about before investing in a company like Zoom. Sure, there are talks about Zoom coming out with other avenues of revenue like the Zoom phone, but the meat of their business is certainly coming from the work from home trend. The last point I want to make about the macro picture of Zoom here is that the word Zoom is now part of our language. People now say, let's Zoom tonight. We do not say, let's Skype tonight or let's Cisco WebEx tonight. This may seem like a small and trivial point, but to me it's actually an incredible bull case for Zoom because it now has the name recognition of being the premier video conferencing platform. It now has a foothold in life as we know it. Another way to think about this point is Google. When was the last time you heard someone say, I don't believe you, let me Bing this? If you heard that recently, then you're probably in a weird part of the world like Florida, because normal people say, I don't believe you, let me Google this. Now think of the last time you used Bing versus Google. This is showing how powerful the effect of including a word into the language that we speak is. To me, that is a good sign that Zoom has the runway to impact our lives even further because we all know what it is and we're now familiar with it. So after talking about the macro picture of Zoom, let's head on over to Zoom's earnings report so that we can talk specifically about Zoom as a company and see how it's doing and see how it's setting itself up for the future. So here we are in Zoom's earnings report, and of course we are seeing our revenues here increasing year over year dramatically. And the reason for that is because the fourth quarter last year, this was before the health crisis. Because of that, comparing the year over year numbers to me are not actually that important at all because we are in a different macro environment. Because of that, I actually want to see how the company is doing on a quarter over quarter basis. And if we head on over to the investor presentation, we see that they kindly give us this data, with this being the most recent quarter and this being the quarter before. And if we actually look at the data here, we actually see that the company is still growing revenues quarter over quarter. To me, this was very surprising to see and actually an incredibly bullish sign for Zoom. To me, it's saying that the probability of Zoom being a one-hit wonder company is now less, and is showing the stickiness of the customer base. By continuing to grow the company 3 quarters after the initial shutdowns, it's showing that there could still be people out there who want to go onto Zoom. this is continued to be shown in the customer block of the data here, where we see businesses of more than 10 people and businesses making more than $100,000 trailing 12-month revenues are still adopting Zoom, and the adoption is still increasing. Even as this is incredibly impressive numbers for Zoom, you need to keep in mind that the world, or the world except Florida, was still in lockdown during this time. This could definitely change if the macro climate changes again to reopening. Again, the main point of this video is that you have to come to your own decision on whether you think this work from home trend will continue for years in the future before you invest in a company like Zoom. You also have to keep in mind who Zoom's competitors are, mainly Microsoft Teams. You have to be keeping an eye on them as well to make sure that Zoom is not slipping in market share. So after we talked about the growing fundamentals of Zoom, now let's head on over to Zoom's trading charts to see if there's a level or two to buy Zoom if we want to buy Zoom. So here we are in Zoom's trading charts, and we can see that we are actually in a pretty well-defined downtrend here. Since the all-time high back in October, we've been making lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, and lower highs. And that's actually normally a bearish trend. Back in August, we see that we really gapped up from this $300 to $310 level all the way up to the $450 range. I think that this is actually the near support level that I see, where we broke out of around the $300 to $310 level. We see that we approached this level on March 8th, hit our feet against the floor here, and then bounced right back upwards. So I think if we come back down to the $300 to the $310 range here, then I think that would be the place where I'm looking to step into Zoom if I wanted to step into Zoom. I think our resistance level here is this $360 level here. We see that buyers really stepped in around this $360 level here, which helped support the stock here, 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 and here. But now, because we're below this equilibrium level, that equilibrium level will now act as resistance. Just to cover the other major indicators here, the MACD, which is a measure of momentum, is still negative. However, if we zoom in here, we see that our blue line is actually looking like it's about to bottom out, or the derivative of the line is coming close to zero. This is actually a bullish sign to me because it's saying that the short-term momentum is now becoming positive, which could mean that we could see a momentum lift for Zoom stock, which could make it go higher. We also see that the RSI here, which is also a measure of momentum, poked its head into oversold territory, but then rebounded sharply upwards. Again, a bullish sign to me because we are seeing some strength in the name. But you do have to remember the macro picture of what's going on here. Interest rates are still rising, and because everybody's watching that, you should be aware of how that affects your downside risk with Zoom. Also think about the stay-at-home trend. Do you think people are going to stay at home and work from home forever? For me, I'm actually pretty surprised at the fundamentals of Zoom. Zoom is still seeing very impressive growth rates. Also, like I said, the word Zoom being incorporated into our vernacular is a really important thing as well. So I think betting on Zoom is a little bit risky, but I think the risk may pay off if Zoom can continue its growth rate and if it can continue to find new avenues to diversify its revenue.